Oh my God. He actually threw the entire plate of food at her right in the middle of the upscale restaurant, in front of hundreds of staring eyes. The gloopy pasta slid down her crisp white uniform shirt, and the air of a millionaire's mocking laughter rang out like a slap to the pride of anyone who has ever been looked down upon. She neither fought back nor cried, but quietly walked away, her humiliation lodged in her throat. Yet what no one expected was this: just one day later, a Rolls-Royce appeared outside her shabby apartment complex. And the one who stepped out was not the one offering an apology, but the father of that millionaire's son, carrying a key, an offer, and a punishment so cold it was perfectly just. Valencia, where the crystal glasses are so thin that one fierce glance could shatter them, where the lighting is calibrated to make food look like art, and the laughter of the elite rings out like melodies not meant for the poor. In that glittering world, Lena Carter, 23, was not part of the picture. She was merely the frame cleaner, a silent shadow slipping through the lights without leaving one behind. She served with perfect precision and unwavering devotion, never a word too many, never a smile too few. But beneath that calm facade raged a silent storm, a little sister battling the cruel beast that is lupus, a medicine cabinet on the verge of empty, and a countdown clock no one could see except Lena. That night, Jackson Kessler entered as if the entire restaurant had been built to celebrate his footsteps. His white shirt was impeccably pressed, a Swiss watch gleaming at his wrist. He needed no introduction. His surname, Kessler, alone summoned Valencia's manager to greet him in person. He was the only son of billionaire Robert Kessler, a name powerful enough to close down an entire building for the sake of a quiet dinner. Lena approached their table, back straight, eyes averted, hands steady, though her heart pounded. The powerful hand of entitlement flicked through the menu, issuing orders: tuna tartare, caviar, Japanese parsley, everything at the perfect temperature. Lena noted every detail, missing not a single period. But when the dishes arrived barely 30 seconds later, Jackson set down his fork. A raised brow, a dismissive laugh from his friends, and then the unexpected. He stood, grasped the whole plate of tuna, and hurled it straight at Lena. What followed played out in slow motion, like a nightmare. The cold fish slid down her uniform blouse. The caviar popped against white fabric in wet, jarring sounds. Luxury's flavor clung to her like an indelible brand of shame. She did not scream. She did not react. She merely stood, eyes widened in horror, as if she could not believe a human being was capable of such cruelty. Silence engulfed the restaurant. No one turned away. They watched, but with vacant, lifeless eyes, as though speaking would shatter the crystal. Lena clenched her fists. She refused to shed a single tear, not out of pride, but because her sister needed medicine, needed her to stay strong, needed her to stand firm. A few minutes later, the manager appeared. He did not ask if Lena was all right. He did not look at her stained uniform. He only looked to Jackson with a crooked smile and a nod like a beggar seeking favor. Then he turned to Lena, his voice lowered as though addressing a broken object. "You may go. Don't bother coming back tomorrow. Do not return. No apology, no defense. Only a cold truth. In this world, money is always right, and the poor are never allowed to be wrong, even to exist." Lena walked out of Valencia carrying the weight of that ruined place on her shoulders. No one saw her off. No words were spoken. Only her footsteps, light yet laden, echoed beneath the false sparkle of the lights. She was not afraid of losing her job. She was terrified of losing her sister's last chance at life. That was what nearly suffocated her as she stepped into the night. And in the moment, she believed she had fallen into her deepest abyss, A luxury car silently rolled down the fateful street toward her, carrying a plan to restore everything the world had stolen in a way no one would expect. The question was, what could compel the father of the man who humiliated her to step into the light himself?
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
Robert Kessler's office was always silent, even when the whole world outside was screaming about profits, stocks, or slander. The dark oak-paneled walls, the soft glow of the antique desk lamp, and the old map of Pennsylvania hanging behind him all told the story of a man who rose not from money, but from mud, broken bricks, and calloused hands. He had worked on rooftops in winter's deepest freeze. He had driven delivery trucks all night just to pay tuition for his elderly mother going back to high school. Robert wasn't born into silk and satin, and because of that, he knew better than anyone. Some stains on one's character, no amount of water can ever wash away. That morning, his phone rang while he was brewing his coffee. A ritual he performed himself to remind him of his roots. His secretary passed him an anonymous email. Only a few lines of text, accompanied by a photograph. In the photo was a young waitress, her uniform caked in food, eyes wide, standing amid the silent stares of suited men wearing gold watches. And at the center of the frame, the one laughing, was his son. Robert did not slam his fist on the desk. He did not call anyone. He did not curse like an out-of-control father. He simply sat in silence for several minutes, his gaze, not angry but heavy, as if he had finally confronted what he had long feared. His son Jackson was not only arrogant, but rapidly becoming the worst version of all the people he had ever despised. Robert had vowed, if he ever had a child, he would not raise someone who believed wealth gave them license to trample others. But now here he was in that white shirt, that icy smile, an unmerciful reminder that he had failed. The media? The press? A public apology? Robert knew well that was not the answer. It was merely glossy paint on a rotting door. No, he didn't want to manage the crisis. He wanted to dissect the very core of the foul character growing inside his own flesh. That afternoon, Robert instructed that no one was to enter his office. He opened a desk drawer and retrieved a small black velvet box. Inside lay the key to a Rolls-Royce Phantom, a symbol of power, but this time, not intended for Jackson. It was the instrument for doing something no one expected him to do, to hand that power over to the very person his son had humiliated, and to create a new playing field where morality would be the only law. Robert had his investigators look into the girl from the photograph. Her name was Lena Carter. No criminal record, no blemishes. Working 2 shifts a day, living in the rundown South Central apartments. Mother passed away early, raising her sick sister alone. No lawsuits, no public outcry, no online pity posts. She vanished quietly, as if she had never existed. That was what choked him up, because people like Lena are too often buried in silence, and it is precisely that silence that emboldens people like Jackson to behave as though they are gods. Robert did not want to apologize to her. He wanted to give her back control of her story. A proposal began to take shape. Lena would keep the Rolls-Royce key, but not just to drive it. She would become the project manager of a new community initiative funded by Robert. And Jackson, yes, Jackson himself would have to work under her authority, with no stipend and no exemptions. Robert didn't call it a punishment. To him, it was therapy. A blow to arrogance. A compass reset for his son's moral bearing. When the plan was set, he rose, donned his coat, strapped on his watch, and climbed into the car. No secretary, no press. Just a father, driving his Rolls-Royce to the gates of a poor apartment complex, to do what most elites would never dare, Restore the balance of justice to the one who had been wronged. Dear viewers, I have a small favor to ask. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy inspirational stories, and don't forget to leave a comment telling me where are you watching from and what time is it there right now. I always feel amazing seeing people from around the world coming together to share a meaningful moment. That morning, sunlight filtered through the iron bars of the south central apartment window, falling on the dark circles under Lena Carter's eyes. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching an overdue electricity bill, yet still hearing Haley's labored breathing in the next room. The oxygen machine sputtered again, another sign that the day was beginning with fresh worry. Lena hadn't even had time to think about finding a new job. After that night at Valencia, she couldn't bring herself to fill out applications or rewrite her resume. She knew only one thing. If she didn't earn money today, Haley's special prescription would be canceled. She rose, tied her hair back, and was about to step outside to buy a few discounted soup cans when the soft hiss of brakes on the street froze her in place. It wasn't the usual rattle of a car in this neighborhood, no growling engine, no blaring rap music. That sound was smooth, seamless, like the breath of something far too expensive to belong here. When Lena opened the door, she almost froze. A glossy black Rolls-Royce Phantom stood below, reflecting the dilapidated building in a cruel parody. And beside it, no suited chauffeur, no delivery person, stood Robert Kessler. He was serene, impossible to overlook. His charcoal coat and Italian leather shoes bespoke wealth. But his gaze, unlike any affluent patron she'd ever served, was neither cold nor pitying. It was expectant. Without a word wasted, Robert approached Lena and held out a small wooden box. Inside lay the key to the car parked before her. "This is not a gift," he said, his voice low and clear. "This is a tool." Lena did not touch the key. She stared at him, bewildered, wary, her guard instinct flaring. She wasn't used to people like this appearing in her neighborhood, least of all bringing no strings attached. Robert understood her silence. He spoke directly, without embellishment. "I'm launching a new branch of the Kessler Foundation, a branch that truly listens to those who've been hurt, and I want you to be its first chief executive officer." The air seemed to freeze. "And," he continued, his tone growing heavier, "your first assignment is to oversee Jackson directly. Starting today, he loses all access to bank accounts, credit cards, and personal vehicles. He will work under your authority. No exceptions." Lena could barely believe what she'd heard. Her eyes searched the man before her for a sign of jest or hidden agenda. But his gaze held no game, only a profoundly human fear that his son might grow up to lose his very humanity. In that suspended moment, the world seemed to stop. Lena thought back to the previous night, the cold food thrown on her, the echoing laughter in her mind, and the silence of an entire system as it cast her out. Then she looked again at the key. The metal shimmered in the light, a bitter reminder. If she wanted to change anything, she could not remain on the sidelines forever. Robert did not wait for her answer. He knew if she possessed the strength to swallow that humiliation without breaking, she also had the clarity to understand this was no charity. This was a chance to redefine her own worth. And for the first time in years, Lena's heart held more than fear. It held something akin to power untainted by its corrupting influence. But if humiliation could be handed back as a reverse gift, could justice truly begin with the key to $1 million car? That morning, the sun rose slowly over affluent Westwood, its light glinting off the polished wooden floor of Jackson Kessler's 41st-floor penthouse. Rich black coffee dripped into a baccarat crystal tumbler, a crisply ironed shirt hung ready on its hook, and he lounged, idly watching the news on the enormous wall-mounted television, while awaiting his usual driver to whisk him somewhere. He had no idea what today held. For Jackson, each new day was merely a backdrop for spending money and drawing attention. Yet today carried an unusual sluggishness. His texts to his assistant went unanswered. Calls to his father were cut off. His banking app flashed, "Access error." A flicker of annoyance crossed his mind, but he maintained his nonchalant posture. Probably just a technical glitch. Money never truly vanished, especially not the Kessler fortune. Stepping out of the elevator, though, he sensed something amiss. No sleek, black limo was waiting curbside. No chauffeur, no bodyguard, no one. Only a glossy black Rolls-Royce Phantom sat at the curb. The passenger window lowered. Behind the wheel was Lena Carter. She wore none of her waitress attire. No tray in hand, no bowed head. Her gaze was as cold as steel, yet no shout escaped her lips. Simply calm, yet enough to make Jackson feel diminished. As he reached for the passenger door to slide in by habit, she merely tilted her head, lowered the window a fraction more, and said in an even voice, "Back seat. This is my car. I'm taking you to your first day on the job." A stunned pause, not at her icy tone, but because that sentence laid him bare. On the job? He nearly laughed. But at whom? Lena had already turned away. She no longer looked at him, and now, the only thing Jackson could do was comply. The Rolls-Royce glided along familiar boulevards, yet this time it did not turn toward any luxury high-rises. Instead, it drove deep eastward through neighborhoods Jackson had never set foot in, where storefronts wore peeling paint, laundromats smelled of mildew, and homeless souls sat quietly on sidewalks like forgotten memories of the city. The car halted before an aging building bearing the sign, Inner Spark Youth and Homeless Support Center. Lena stepped out without waiting for him. Inside, no one recognized Jackson's name. No one cared. No admiring glances, no probing stares. Only work and the hush of a place accustomed to those who'd lost everything. Jackson's first day duties: sweeping the yard, sorting donated goods, and scrubbing public toilets facilities he'd never even used. The coarse wooden broom burned the palms of his hands. The smell of bleach stung his nostrils, turning his stomach, but no one noticed. No one stopped. And Jackson, who once commanded breathless silence at a restaurant entrance, had become a silent shadow in a place without spotlights. His phone lay dead in his pocket. The signal was cut. His father, the man who could make things disappear, this time, had truly vanished. As Jackson scrubbed the floor with hands unaccustomed to soap, Lena's eyes flicked over him from down the hallway. No words, no expression. She walked on as if he had never existed. And it was that invisibility, not the hard labor, that took his breath away. Yet, when no one any longer listens to your name, might Jackson finally learn to hear himself? Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or sip some water before continuing the story, because the twists to come are unexpected. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the tale, so we know you're still with us. In his first days at Inner Spark, Jackson Kessler received no special treatment. No one called his name. No one handed him a cleaner pair of gloves. Nor did anyone spare him an easier task than everyone else. Lena, the very woman he had humiliated before dozens of onlookers, now stood at the head of this place. And each morning she arrived before him, noted the day's assignments, gave a nod, then walked off as if he were nothing more than a faint entry on the staff roster. She spoke little, held no grudge. There were no mocking glances, no sarcastic remarks. Lena quietly delegated tasks, monitored progress, then moved on. Her silence was almost kind, yet icy. It did not tear him apart. Instead, it forced him to face the broken pieces within himself. Jackson had always believed revenge consisted of whips, humiliation, public shaming. But Lena needed none of that. She taught him something far more painful: deliberate neglect. At first, Jackson tensed. He threw himself into each duty, striving for speed and perfection to earn notice, much as he had done at opulent parties, to impress, to win admiration. But here, nobody cared about spectacle. They cared only about results and genuine presence. In week 1, he stocked the food pantry. In week 2, he rode along delivering free meals to winter shelters. In week 3, he knelt to scrub every tile in the kitchen where heat and bleach clung to his skin like a second layer. Then, one late afternoon, Jackson witnessed something that squeezed his heart. A boy of about 14, in ragged clothes, cradled a box of hot food from the distribution line. His face was ashen with hunger, but his eyes lit up as he lifted the lid. He turned to a friend beside him, whispering, "Tonight, I won't go to bed hungry." Lena said nothing in that moment. Yet it was that instant that opened Jackson's eyes. While he had once wasted hundreds-dollar dishes for being too cold, there were children who celebrated simply at the taste of life. He began to quiet down, to slow his pace. No more asking, "Done yet?" No more sighing in exhaustion. Each morning, he arrived a bit earlier. When he spotted low supplies in the pantry, he replenished them on his own. When he saw an elderly woman limping under a heavy bag of food, he ran over to carry it without waiting to be asked. Then, one Friday afternoon in the kitchen, an aging cook slipped and fell hard. Panic rippled through the room. In that instant, Jackson, forgoing any thought of reputation, forgetting who he had been, rushed to support the man, carefully checked his trembling hand, then helped him to a chair and fetched an ice pack. Everything happened so quickly, but Lena saw it all. She stood at the end of the corridor, clipboard in hand, her gaze lingering on Jackson, bent over the older man. For the first time since they'd met again, her eyes softened, no longer cold, no longer harsh. Not forgiveness, but a look of acknowledgement. And Jackson felt it more deeply than any praise could offer. He didn't need applause or pats on the back. What he needed now was to become good enough that he could never again deserve contempt. But would this quiet transformation within him prove large enough to mend a fracture that had once shattered another's heart? 2 months passed. Summer in Los Angeles gradually gave way to early autumn, when the air carried a crisp bite and the sunlight softened, as if the city itself were learning to calm down after its silent chaos. In the glass tower of the Kessler Foundation, Robert Kessler stood by the window, quietly watching the slow flow of people below. He did not summon Lena to his office out of courtesy. He called her because he respected her. Lena entered, neatly dressed in a simple charcoal gray suit. No heavy makeup, no elaborate accessories. Yet her eyes were sharper than ever. Not the cold glare of someone on guard, but the gaze of someone who had survived an abyss and now knew how to rebuild solid ground beneath her feet. On his desk lay a thick file labeled Inner Spark Project, Statewide Expansion, California. Robert gently pushed the file toward her. No long speech, no loud praise. Only a brief sentence. "You've done exceptionally well." And Jackson finally learned the first lesson: to be silent and listen. Lena did not reply immediately, but something within her relaxed, as if for the first time in years she could breathe without pain in her chest. Meanwhile, across town, Jackson stood at the bus stop near the youth shelter. Gone was the designer shirt. He wore only a faded hoodie and worn sneakers. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Lena. "If you're truly serious about continuing, meet me on Monday. Not as someone's son, but as someone who knows how to carry water, scrub floors, and listen." Jackson read and reread the text as if it were an invitation into a world he had never believed he could enter barefoot. Not because he wasn't worthy, but because he had never been humble enough. That evening, he returned to what had once been Lena's cramped apartment, the room that bore witness to a girl struggling between humiliation and hope. But now, it was different. Freshly painted door, potted greenery hanging from the balcony, and inside, the warm glow of a true home. The new apartment stood in a quiet, secure neighborhood, funded by the very community project Lena managed. She wasn't home. The door opened to reveal Haley, the little girl who had once lain helpless in bed, her lips purple from lupus now standing tall, healthy, beaming. In her hand was a storybook, her hair neatly tied back, cheeks rosy from running in and out. Jackson froze. His throat tightened. Not from surprise, but from something deeper, a mingling of shame and gratitude he had never known. "Have you forgiven me?" he whispered. Haley looked up, her gaze no longer filled with the old resentment, but with a very real sparkle. "Not yet," she replied, then smiled softly. "But I think my sister has." Jackson lowered his head, said nothing. In that moment he understood. Forgiveness is not erasure, but acceptance that someone has changed not through words, but through the smallest, most consistent actions each day. Lena came home late that night. She found Jackson's old shoes neatly placed by the door and Haley telling him stories as though that one night at Valencia had never happened. Lena did not interrupt. She simply stood there, quietly watching two people, once a burden, and a torment now learning to become human again from the ground up. Some wounds need no revenge to heal. Some apologies arrive not by words, but by a journey of making amends. Lena and Jackson's story is not just about humiliation or atonement. It proves that true power does not come from money, but from choosing to forgive when you have every right not to. And sometimes, you change someone not with anger, but with disciplined silence and steadfast trust. If you have ever been belittled, hurt, or forced to stand alone in the dark, remember, your story is not over. Perhaps tomorrow, you will be the one to give someone else a second chance. Thank you for listening to the very end. If this story touched you, please leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so we can spread more healing stories together. You deserve to see yourself in stories of kindness. And this is only one small chapter in that journey.